Here's another technical request. This person says, I'm confused about edges and why making them soft or hard is important. Would you please explain edges in one of your videos? Well, I'm about to do that right now. One thing that is important about controlling edges is how they communicate to the viewer. Now, the viewer is looking at a two-dimensional work. This is realistic painting, but it's important in abstract painting too. But the viewer is looking at a two-dimensional work, and our eyes are responding to that work. In some cases, we're unconscious as to how our eyes are responding. But so at least two things are happening, maybe more than that. One is that the edges are telling us something about what the images are doing. For example, we see images moving into space with those images in front having harder edges usually than the images in the distance. Edges tend to get softer as images go into the distance. That's one thing. Well, the other thing is that our eyes tend to go to sharp edges. So if we want to call attention to an area in a painting, sharp edges will usually do that. And then another thing, that when we're controlling the degree of softness or hardness of an edge in a single image, we can sort of make it a little more interesting by softening some of those edges that we might not even see softened. So let's go through this, and I've just got one photo here because it has something of everything in it. But I want to take them one at a time. Hard edge first. What is a hard edge? Well, the hardest edge that we'll see usually will be not only an edge that's hard, which I'll show in just a moment, but it's also an edge that's created with a strong value contrast. So let's put a very dark color here, very dark value. It's usually the value contrast that where we see that, and I'll just make that edge just as sharp as I can make it there. I'm going to wash the brush out really, really well and dry it really, really well, which is always important. That's technical too. Now, what I'll do is I'll go with, I'm going to just pick up white, but I'm going to tint it just a little bit so that you can see it go on. So I'll just pull just a tiny bit of that dark into it, just to tint it enough so that perhaps you can see it. Now, I'm going to, technically for oil painting, it's important to pull the brush so that it's, for making a sharp edge, pull the paint in the brush, if you look on the palette here, so that it is smooth on both sides of the brush. And then I will just place that there and pick up a little bit more and turn my brush this way and sharpen it that way. Now you see that is a very sharp edge. Well, I can make another edge that is still sharp but not quite as strong, and that means that the closer the value contrast, edge can still be sharp, but it's not as jarring sharp. So we can also control the feeling or the perception of edges with the value, with the degree of value contrast. So to show you that, I'll pull a little bit, I'll put some more value, I'll get that white a little darker, about a middle value like this. Let's put it on this side, like that. Not quite, there we go. Now, let's put a little bit more of that into the brush, and then let's just push it right like that and sharpen that edge. Now you can see that edge is sharp, but it doesn't feel, it's just as sharp as this one, but we don't perceive it as being quite so sharp. So the closer the values are, the less jarring a sharp edge is. So that's the hard edge. Now, where do we see hard edges in the photograph? You see them right here, this tree in front. You see the hard edge, the very, very dark against the light of the fog, very foggy scene here. But the trees that are closer to us in the front are then have a sharper or harder edge, and so that's important. Now, as as these trees move into the distance, you can see they get closer in value, but their edges feel softer. And where the fog is really hitting strong here, we actually see the softer edge. So the softer edge, we'll just use those same values so that you can actually discern the difference between the edges. The softer, I'll take the really strong value contrast first, and that would be this value right here. Let's mix it here just a little bit with this to get a little darker. And now I'll start out by making that, let's get that just a little bit more neutral. Start out by making the edge hard, like that. Then I'll go with the lighter version, the same version that we see right here, the lighter version. And let's pull just a little bit more white into the brush, and then let's just barely tint it so you can see it. Now, against real white that doesn't have any color or tint in it whatsoever, the same thing holds true. It's still going to be controlled by how those edges are existing side by side. Now, that is a hard edge. To get it softer, we need to slightly blend. Now, there are degrees. Hard, then slightly soft, slightly softer, and slightly softer than that. And the degree to which we soften the edge, you know what happens? Your eye just glides right through it. Here, your eye stops. It stops between those edges. That's why I will go to a really sharp edge in a painting. But if they're slightly blended, or to the degree that those edges are blended, the eye sort of glides through it. And you don't stop, your eye doesn't stop as fast. But we can often then use those edges to pull the eye through the painting. And so to blend the edge like that, let's pull most of that paint out of the brush. To make the edge softer, what we do is we blend it. Now, if I just take my brush and come right down, there we go. Now that edge is blended, and you can see the difference between how this feels and how this feels. Now, the degree to which it's blended, let's just get it a little bit more blended and make it a little bit softer. The degree to which it's blended will make the eye go more smoothly. Now, we see what happens when we really start blending it. We start getting a slight gradation. Let's be sure that we blend this too. We start getting a slight gradation between those two edges. You see that right here. Maybe that's kind of roughly done, but you get the idea. So that goes then, the way that works visually is the eye is sort of gliding through. So we can control that by the degree of softness that we give to our edges. And we see something like that about right in here. And we get the feeling of that, even these are much closer, like areas right in here and here, where those edges are actually blended one into the other. Now, I do want to show you the difference in how it feels. I've done a little bit of hacking here to one area of the photograph just to show you. Now, I'll just put these side by side here. Let's pretty much put them in the vicinity and show you something else. You see, I put these edges the same width as these are, but you notice how they want to come forward. Notice how they want to attract your eye. Your eye wants to go to them, and how it feels out of concert with the rest of the scene. Just doesn't feel right to have those quite. Now, if we'd had the trunks coming all the way down here, we'd have the feeling they're tiny little saplings right in front of our eyes, but they don't. They stop back there. Doesn't make any sense. Neither does it make any sense as it goes up, because if you will notice in this one right here, if you notice, especially right in here, as that gets further up into the fog, you see how the values get closer and the edges get softer, see, as I go up. And so where have I hacked that? I hacked this one. Look, see? So you can see right here the edges just get softer, so it feels like it's going up into the fog, and here it feels disconcerting. So that's the reason we need to control how soft or how hard we make those edges, and also watch their value contrast. How close are they in value to each other? Now the lost edge is what you may call the extreme version of this. The lost edge is an edge where we can't really see the difference of one image moving into another. The best way to show the lost edge is to do something like this. Usually, let's do it this way. Usually, in a lost edge, we will have the edge of an image next to an edge of a background or an edge of another image. Now, we call that positive. The image is positive, and the area around it is negative. So if I create some negative space right here, if I just, let me just go really, really quick here and throw this in as maybe some negative space. And I think maybe just, I always like to use a cylinder to illustrate stuff like that, or the perception of a cylinder. So we could say something like that. And then, let's rinse the brush really, really good. And then I could suggest that cylinder. Now, oh, by the way, the lost edge requires us to fill in the information that the edge doesn't provide. An edge shows a division of something. So, for example, the edge here says this is where the tree ends, and this is where that space behind it begins. And so it shows us the end, but right here we see the edge is slightly disappearing. That's kind of a lost edge. We really see the edges disappear up here. You see the tree trunk as it's going up. You see what's going on right there? And we don't really see see the trunk anymore, so it disappears. That is the lost edge. But another way to communicate the idea of lost edge is to do it like this. Now I would say, okay, perhaps there is shadow on this side, and perhaps this is getting gradually lighter as it goes over. Say something like that. Let's just make this very rough. And we have all this blended, because this would, by blending this, gradating that into this, we're creating their feeling of roundness. Well, that doesn't have to do with edges, but now let's get a little bit more white. Just say, for example, if the light is shining really strong right here, so we'll have an edge. And whoops, I kind of scooted out of the way there. Have an edge right there. And let's say that edge, let's push that back in right here. That's better right there. Now, and we said this is blended. This would be blended right there like that. And there we see the edge. But as it comes down, well, let's make the edge just a little bit, let's make it a little sharper. I have it soft, but not quite that soft. That sort of gets lost in space right there. All right, let's make this work. There we go, right there. All right, so now we see there's an edge there. Now, as I come down, if I gradually let that value become the same value as the background value right in here, I have a lost edge. And now I can show you. You see, the edge disappears. Now I've got, let's get this blended so that it all makes some sort of visual sense. There we go, right there. Now, let's get that just a little bit more lost. Just a tiny bit more lost. By making this value right here a little closer to that value back there. Add a little dark there and then kind of blend it in. There we go, just like that. There we go. There we go. And then gradually, I'll let that edge gradually begin to appear. Now you can see there's a lost edge. This is suggested we see the edge here, which really suggests the shape, but our eyes are filling in what we know to be right here, and that's the edge lost. So you can see you can manipulate is not a good word, I hate that word, but you can control how images appear in relationship to each other, in relationship in space, just by controlling the degree of sharpness or softness of the edge, or actually letting that edge disappear. Be sure to view all of our quick tips. And while you're doing so, subscribe to the channel, click on the bell so you'll always get a notice when we produce a new quick tip, which is every week. And if you have a question, leave it in the comments section and we'll make a quick tip for you. Also, take a trip over to DianneMize.com where I have full-length lessons, downloads, DVDs, lots of other stuff there, some free stuff for you. And while you're there, you can subscribe to the newsletter, and that way you'll always be informed every time we do something new.